and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Joon. Before we get started, let's first get a glimpse of today's highlights. Korea's industrial output falls again in April and by more than expected amid weak exports and the country's corporate restructuring drive. We take a closer look at President Park Geun-hye's trip to East Africa and how her visit is expected to open a new door of business opportunities for Korea and Africa. These stories and more coming right up. But first, Korea's overall industrial output fell on month in April for the first time in 3 months, while factory production slid by more than economists projected. Our Shin Se-min has this report.
Statistics Korea says the nation's overall industrial output went down 0.8% in April from the month before, while factory output slid 1.3%. On an annual basis, industrial production in mining, manufacturing, and electricity and gas dropped 2.8%, extending the negative streak to 2 months. Spurting auto production that plunged 8.7% on year, as well as falling output in the electronics parts and display sectors played a big part in the overall fall. Statistics Korea says a jump in production in the semiconductor and petroleum industries worked to offset what would have otherwise been a much bigger decline. But it's not all doom and gloom. Domestic consumption expanded last month, increasing 4.2% on the back of robust sales of durable and non-durable goods like automobiles and cosmetics.
Domestic demand is good at this time, and the improved leading composite index indicates the economy will pick up smooth recovery momentum in the future.
Production in the service sector grew over 2% on year and 0.5% on month, thanks to the steady stream of Chinese tourists vacationing in Korea. Experts say looking ahead, the general output figures won't change much.
Considering that there aren't many external factors looming that would hamper both the local and global economy, current circumstances will persist for the time being.
But experts add the potential U.S. rate hike in the coming months may add reason for greater concern down the line. Shin Se-min, Business Daily.
Korea's competitiveness on the global stage may be slipping. An annual ranking by IMD World Competitiveness Center dropped Asia's fourth largest economy 4 notches lower than what it was last year. Now that puts Korea at 29th, just on the brink of dropping out of the top 30 of the 61 countries measured. The Swiss-based research group bases its evaluation on factors like economic achievements and infrastructure, as well as government and corporate efficiency. Meanwhile, the U.S. lost its place as the world's most competitive economy, giving it up to Hong Kong at number 1, followed by Switzerland at number 2. Singapore and Sweden rounded out the top 5. Bondholders of financially troubled Hyundai Merchant Marine have reached an agreement to recast roughly $250 million of its debt. The ailing shipbuilder has proposed to swap more than half of its debt for corporate stocks, with the remainder to be paid back over 3 years with a 2-year grace period. The bondholders agreed to trade some $570 million of the company's debt for stocks last week as part of efforts to keep the company afloat. Hyundai Merchant's total debt amounted to around $4.4 billion as of March. President Park Geun-hye is now on the final leg of her East Africa tour, arriving in Kenya, the biggest economy in that region. She'll hold summit talks with her Kenyan counterpart later on this Tuesday. And our Song Ji-sun, who is traveling with the president, files this report from Nairobi.
Kenya, the largest economy in East Africa, is also Korea's biggest trading partner in the region. The transportation and economic hub also functions as a gateway to enter the entire continent, as well as the European and the American markets. Kenya is vying to emerge as a new industrial nation with its Vision 2030 for growth, and President Park's visit to Nairobi will be focused on laying a foundation for Korean businesses to enter East Africa. In exchange, Korea will share its knowledge in the e-government, ICT, and health sectors, And President Park will also ask for Nairobi's cooperation in implementing the UN sanctions on North Korea, with the hope that it will encourage other African nations to follow suit. President Park has a full day ahead with a summit followed by a cultural event and a business forum. She will also take a look at how the Korea Aid Development Program will run in Kenya and stop by the UN office in Nairobi, which is the United Nations headquarters in Africa. 송지선, Business Daily, Nairobi.
And after wrapping up her visit in Kenya, President Park will be heading over to France. So we take a look at what kind of achievements we've seen out of her visit so far in Africa and what lies ahead for economic relations between Korea and the world's second largest continent.
With hopes of finding ways to grow together, President Park Geun-hye embarked on a trip to Africa last week. During the president's visit to Ethiopia, which was the first stop on her East Africa tour, Korean businessmen accompanying President Park signed potential deals worth $24 million with their Ethiopian counterparts, opening a gateway to new opportunities. Not only that, as part of efforts to boost cooperation, the president also oversaw the launch of Korea Aid, a new comprehensive development assistance program that provides healthcare, food, and cultural services. Then, in Uganda, more than 250 Korean and Ugandan business leaders came together in a forum with President Park and Uganda's trade minister in attendance. There, they discussed investing in the African nation while looking for ways to step up cooperation in various sectors, such as agriculture, energy, ICT, textile, and tourism. So what will all of this mean in terms of bolstering ties between Korea and the three East African nations? And what are some of the tasks that lie ahead? We'll get a closer look.
And to tell us more about this, Professor Yang Jun-seok from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. So good to see you, Professor.
Happy to be here.
So with her latest visit to Africa, the president has wrapped up visits to 6 continents around the world. Now, the president focused a lot on strengthening economic diplomacy during those visits. So what kind of impact does a president's state visit to a country have on a country's economy then?
Okay, well, whenever a president goes on these visits, it's usually one of 3 reasons. One, there's political implications, and then there's international meetings, and the third group is the economic implication, where you go to strengthen economic ties. And usually when you make a trip like that, you're either confirming an ongoing economic relationship, or you want to strengthen a new relationship or an existing relationship that hasn't really prospered all that much. I think Africa could be considered as trying to reinforce something that hasn't really caught on a lot of attention in Korea. And if you look at some of the past visits, I think Iran is a good example. Iran used to be one of Korea's major trading partners, but in the last 5 or 10 years, the ties may have weakened a lot, partially because of the sanctions against Iran, but also partially because, well, we were concentrating a lot more on, say, China or ASEAN countries, which are growing a lot faster.
Right.
This is an opportunity to sort of re-examine the relationship and either begin or reaffirm a lot of the ties that we had earlier. So usually there's a lot of PR, and hopefully there will be more lasting ties which last after a president comes back to Korea.
Now, the president's trip to Africa was largely focused on providing a new breakthrough for the Korean economy. And we've seen the same thing with her trips to Iran and Latin America. So what were some notable accomplishments during her visits that we could take note of?
Well, in the case of Iran, she signed, or Korean companies, because of her visit, signed MOUs, which amounted to about $37.1 billion.
Wow.
Now, to put that in comparison, according to the International Contractors Association of Korea, it's a construction companies group which specialize in foreign construction. In 2014, which is the last figure that they had available, Korean construction firms received orders of $66 billion. So during that one visit to Iran, they got about half the orders that they got for 2014. So even though that will be spread around many years, it is still a major accomplishment, I think, and good news for the construction sector. Now, if you look at, say, the Latin American visit, then you had a MOU and contracts worth about $3 billion dealing with internet-based exports over the next 5 years. So a lot of these trips do bring a lot of business to Korea, which is good news. What worries me a little bit is that, typically, you don't expect the president to do a lot of salesmanship. You expect the businesses to go and sell themselves.
Right.
So it makes me somewhat uneasy that sometimes you have to depend a lot on these presidential visits to get a lot of these contracts. But given the international recession currently, every little bit helps.
Oh, yeah. And of course, there were high expectations to her trip in Africa. We know that business forums actually took place in Ethiopia and Uganda. Now, what came out of these forums?
Well, they got a MOU and contracts worth about $24 million.
Okay.
Smaller businesses, it's really hard for other buyers and sellers to know you, and it's also very difficult for you to meet buyers and sellers that you can sell or buy your goods to. So these type of forums or conventions or salesman meetings allow these companies to come together and meet each other, form networks that they can buy and sell goods either presently or in the future. And presidential visits also give an opportunity to have these type of convention and forums and get more attention than they would if the president wasn't there.
Now, during her trip, the president also introduced the government's project called Korea Aid. Now, what is this project and how is this expected to help African nations as well as Korea?
Okay, well, typically when you have these type of foreign aid, you give them money or you set up foundations. Korea Aid seems to be more unusual in the fact that they're getting very personal in a sense that one of the more innovative programs is that they have these trucks which go out and help people directly. They give medical assistance, they give food aid, and also they give examples of Korean food and Korean culture, K-pop music, and so on. There's a bit of a danger that it might be seen as just a PR job rather than trying to help people by itself.
Right.
But still, I think it's very innovative because it allows them to have a hands-on approach. It allows person-to-person contact that you wouldn't necessarily have if you do it through large foundations or cash gifts.
Then what does this mean for Korea, this project?
I think it's important because it allows you to form contacts with foreign people, especially people in Africa, because, well, Africa is one region that Korea really hasn't gone into all that much. And this allows personal-to-personal contact, as I mentioned, that isn't really feasible if you're just giving cash gifts.
So if this goes right, it'll be a win-win project for both countries.
Yes.
All right, well, so it will take us some time, though, for us to see the real results of President Park Geun-hye's economic diplomacy. With that, what are some things that Korea needs to do in order to continue this momentum with Africa?
Well, we need to keep an interest in the region. Now, Africa is one region where Korea doesn't have an FTA. We used to have a mutual study with the South African Customs Union countries, which none of the three countries she's visiting this time belong to. But still, it was sort of our headways into Africa for a while. But we did the study for about 2 years, and I think they mutually agreed that it was not the right time. So we have no negotiations on FTA with African countries right now. And so we cannot strengthen ties through FTA, so we need to find other ways to try to strengthen ties. And we also need to find a way to explore what can we do for each other. Now, there's ministerial meetings between Africa and Korean countries that takes place once every 2 years, so that should be continued, maybe even given a higher profile. Also, I think one of the things that President Park did very well this time is that the reason that she picked this particular time to visit Africa was that there was a meeting of African Union, which is a group of African countries, and they have the what's called Africa Agenda 2069, which is their long-term growth plan, and it does have a lot of components for ICT development, welfare plans, plans to make its citizens richer, and a lot of infrastructure plans. So if we can sort of figure out how Korea can figure into that African agenda, then I think there will be a lot of opportunities for both countries to help each other.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today, Professor.
Thank you.
And that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and goodbye.